The rain came hard, carving rivers through dust, beating the roof like hooves on a coffin lid. Boyd Larkin stood barefoot in the doorway of his ranch house, lantern in hand, watching the storm chew its way across the flats. The kind of rain that made horses nervous and washed bones out of dry creek beds. He didn't hear her approach, didn't see her either, not until the lightning hit the ridge behind her and lit her up like a ghost. She stood in the yard, soaked to the bone, her dress torn above one knee, barefoot in the mud. No horse, no hat, no sound, just her and the rain. Boyd stepped out slowly, lantern lifted. "You lost?" She said nothing. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her shoulders trembled, but not from cold. "Storm'll drown you," he said. Still, no answer. She didn't move until he turned away. Then she followed. He left the door open. She crossed the threshold like someone stepping into a church after a lifetime of sin. Inside, the fire was low. The cabin plain, table, cot, one rifle above the mantel. Boyd fetched a blanket, dropped it over her shoulders. She didn't thank him, didn't need to. He poured her coffee. She stared at it like it might bite. He sat across from her in silence, the storm thundering above them. After a while he spoke. "Name's Boyd." She nodded once. "You?" A long pause. Then, "Mercy." That was all. He didn't ask for more, didn't ask why her hands were scraped raw, why she smelled like smoke under the rain, or why a strip of blood ran down her shin and into the floorboards. Some things were better learned with time, or not at all. She ate quietly, only bread and a slice of dried peach. Her hands shook, but she never looked scared. Boyd had seen fear. This wasn't it. This was aftermath. When the lightning lit the windows again, she flinched. Boyd nodded to the back room. "There's a cot. You're welcome to it." She stood slowly, clutching the blanket, and walked away without a word. Boyd sat alone by the fire. The old dog, Rufus, lifted his head and whined once. Boyd scratched behind his ears. "I know," he muttered. "This'll end messy." So before we ride straight into the fire, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if Frontier Stories speak to your soul. He dozed in the chair, rifle across his lap, half dreaming of fire and dust, until Rufus barked low and sharp. Boyd opened his eyes. The dog was staring out the front window, tail rigid. Boyd rose, crossed the floor, and pulled the curtain aside. 20 riders, lined up across the ridge, silhouettes against the first light of dawn. No torches, no words, just the creak of saddle leather in the breeze. He opened the door, stepped outside, and stared. They didn't move. Then one horse stepped forward, black-coated, tall in the legs. Its rider wore a brown duster, wide hat, and a silver badge that caught the light like a threat. Boyd stepped down from the porch, rifle slung but not raised. The man tipped his hat. "Marshal Harrow," he said, "U.S. Office of Land and Security." Boyd said nothing. Harrow glanced at the house. "Got word a woman passed this way last night. Rain-soaked, on foot." "Lot of ground between here and the river," Boyd said. "True," Harrow replied, "but not many places a woman could shelter without raising eyebrows." Boyd kept his eyes level. "This a manhunt?" "A retrieval," Harrow said. "She's wanted for the murder of a federal surveyor and the theft of government property." Boyd tilted his head. "And that worth riding with 20 men through lightning and mud?" Harrow smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. She has something we want." Boyd folded his arms. "Then go look for it. You won't find it here." Harrow leaned in the saddle, boots creaking. "You sure about that?" A long moment passed. Then Boyd turned and walked back toward the house. Harrow's voice followed him. "We'll be back, with a warrant. You best be ready." Boyd didn't answer. Inside, the fire was nearly out. Mercy sat at the table, fully dressed now, boots on her feet. His boots. She held a mug between both hands like she needed it to stay upright. "They're looking for you," Boyd said. She nodded. "I told them you weren't here." She didn't flinch, just stared at the embers. Boyd reached for the stove, poured what was left of the coffee. "You got a minute to tell me what you're running from?" "I'm not running," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "I left something behind," she added. "That doesn't mean I ran." "Who'd you kill?" Her hands tightened around the mug. "My husband." The air snapped taut. Boyd didn't move. Mercy set the mug down slowly. "His name was Thomas Renner. He was a federal surveyor. Mapped land for the rail expansion. One night, he came home and told me he'd found something." She stood and pulled a damp envelope from her coat. He wrote it down. Names, payments, the land they meant to take before the treaties expired. She placed it on the table. The paper was warped, the ink faded, but the signature was still legible. Thomas Renner. Boyd stared. Mercy's voice cracked. "He was dead 2 days later. And they blamed you. They needed someone to silence, and I was already grieving." Boyd looked down at the envelope. The seal was military, the corners singed. "You brought fire to my door," he said. "I brought truth," she said. "Same thing," he muttered. Outside, the wind shifted, and the riders waited. Boyd watched the envelope like it might catch flame all on its own. The seal had been broken, but the contents, if real, were heavier than bullets. Inside was a letter, a partial map, and a page torn from a field journal. Names were scrawled across it in rushed ink. Names Boyd recognized. One of them was his brother's. He didn't sit, didn't blink. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Mercy stood across the table, pale in the rising light. Thomas kept a journal. Every time he met with army officers, survey teams, even railroad men from Chicago, he wrote it all down. He found out they were redrawing the borderlines early, seizing land by accidental reclassification. Dozens of towns were going to disappear. And they killed him for it. She nodded. "And when I went to the land office to claim what he left behind, they said he'd never existed. No body, no record, no pension." Boyd paced, the paper tight in his fist. "My brother," he said. "Edwin Larkin, he's on here. He helped pass the new state ordinance," she said. "Gave the Army jurisdiction to seize land without notice under emergency expansion clauses." Boyd looked up, something cold in his bones. "I built that man's first barn." Mercy didn't answer. Outside, the riders hadn't moved, like statues waiting for sin to finish growing. Boyd grabbed his coat. "Where are you going?" Mercy asked. "To town. You'll lead them straight to me." "No," he said. "They already know where you are. I'm just going to see what my brother remembers." He stepped toward the door. She caught his wrist. "Boyd," she said, "he won't help you. Then he can bury what's left of this family with his own damn hands." He walked out into the morning light. Rufus, the dog, followed. Harrow was still there, leaning on his saddle horn, eyes like riverbed stone. "Change your mind?" he asked. Boyd climbed onto his horse. "Going to see a man about the law. Want company? Already got a dog," Boyd said, and rode off. The town was 30 minutes south. A wagon spoke of buildings sunburned and hollow. Boyd didn't stop at the saloon or the feed house. He went straight to the courthouse. 2 stories, whitewashed, with a cracked bell tower that hadn't rung since the last flood. Inside, Edwin Larkin sat behind a polished desk, with maps nailed to the walls. He looked older than Boyd remembered, gray at the temples, soft in the hands. "Brother," Edwin said, standing. "It's been years." Boyd tossed the envelope on the desk. Edwin looked down. The smile died. "I asked if it was true," Boyd said. "Now I'm asking again." Edwin sat slowly. "You shouldn't have brought this here. You signed it. I endorsed the expansion clause. I didn't order any killings." Boyd leaned forward. "Don't you dare split hairs while the ink's still wet." Edwin exhaled. "You think we can build a railroad without sacrifice? You think we can expand westward without pushing someone off the trail?" "I think you killed your own name," Boyd said. Edwin's voice dropped. "She's dangerous, Boyd. That woman. She's carrying a fuse with no hand to catch it. She's carrying the truth." "Same thing," Edwin muttered, just like Boyd had said hours earlier. They stared at each other, 2 branches from the same root, both now twisted. Finally, Edwin spoke again. "You came here for a reason. I wanted to see your eyes when you read your name on that page." Edwin nodded slowly. "Then what? I leave. Alone?" Boyd didn't answer. Edwin stood. "They'll come for her. You can't stop it." Boyd walked to the door. "You're right," he said, "but I can make 'em bleed trying." Back at the ranch, Mercy stood at the window, watching the ridge. She hadn't moved for hours. When Boyd returned, she didn't speak. He threw his coat on the chair, unslung the rifle. "You were right," he said. "He won't help." Mercy's face didn't change. "I told you. I needed to see it." She stepped toward him. "They'll come tonight." He nodded. "Then we fight." She glanced at the stove. "There's a cellar. Trapdoor beneath the flour sacks." He raised an eyebrow. "Not to hide," she said. "To store the things we'll need." She walked over, knelt, and pried the door open. Inside was a bundle of oil rags, 2 pistols, and a small satchel filled with papers, cartridges, and something wrapped in leather. Boyd crouched beside her. "What's that?" She handed it to him. He unwrapped it. Inside was a journal, leather-bound, initials etched into the corner. T.R. Thomas Renner. Boyd flipped through the pages. Names, dates, rail companies, military units, a ledger of betrayal. At the back, a single page folded twice. He opened it. It was a map, with red lines marked across territory that hadn't been touched yet, but would be. And at the center, circled in ink, Larkin Ranch. He stared. "They planned this from the beginning," he said. Mercy nodded. "It's not just about the land. It's about who can't speak for it." He stood slowly. "They'll ride tonight, to burn what they can't buy." "We have until sundown," she said, then added softly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For opening the door." He looked at her, rifle in hand. "I ain't closed it yet." The sun dipped behind the ridge like it was hiding from what came next. The shadows stretched long over the yard as Boyd and Mercy moved silently through the ranch house, boarding windows, securing shutters, checking every round they had twice. Rufus sat by the door, ears twitching at every gust of wind. The dog had been through shootouts before. He knew what silence meant. Boyd lit a lantern but turned the wick low. They'll come at nightfall, after the light dies. Mercy checked the rifle he'd given her. Good. I like seeing them first. She looked different now. Still bruised, still tired, but stripped of the tremble. There was steel behind her eyes. Boyd had seen women harden before, but never so fast. Whatever pain she carried had already passed through the fire. What remained was resolve. He watched her silently, then said, "Tell me about the journal." She glanced over. It's not just his notes. It's his death warrant. Boyd sat on the edge of the table. Mercy began slowly, her voice steady. Thomas was assigned to map out military easements for rail development, but he started noticing something odd. Towns being marked for acquisition months before any federal orders were signed. Landowners dying, papers vanishing, and new deeds appearing with different names. Forged? No, she said. Bought. Through shell companies. Friends of senators, army pensioners. Your brother approved half the transactions. Boyd's mouth tightened. He wrote everything down, she said, and when he confronted his superior officer, Colonel Abram Jessup, he was told to drop it or be transferred to a post with a shorter life expectancy. Jessup. The name ran through Boyd like a snake. "You've met him?" he asked. She nodded. "I met him after they killed Thomas. He came to the cabin, drank my coffee, told me there had been a clerical mix-up." "Did you kill him?" "No," she said, voice going sharp. "But I put a bullet in his horse and burned down his escort wagon. I took the journal and ran. That's why they want me. Not for murder. For what I know." Boyd exhaled. "You're not the only one who's buried something," he said. "Jessup used to command my scout unit, years ago. Before the war ended." Mercy looked up. "He saved my life once," Boyd said, then left a town to burn because someone told him the mayor had dealt with Confederates. "He hasn't changed," she said. "No," Boyd agreed, "but I have." They lapsed into silence, the kind of quiet that only happens when two people finally see each other whole. Then Rufus growled low. Mercy crossed to the window, her breath caught. They were coming, not from the ridge, this time from the east, hooves stirring dust, torches, lanterns swinging, at least 8 riders, more in the dark behind them. Boyd stood. "Basement?" She shook her head. "We hold here." He nodded, stepped to the door, and locked it, then pulled the rifle from above the mantel. Mercy slid behind the heavy chair by the hearth, eyes on the doorway, breathing slow. The first shot came fast, through the front window, glass exploding inward. Boyd fired back, hitting nothing but night. More shots followed, hoofbeats pounding, the crack of splinters as bullets chewed the siding. Rufus barked wildly, then ducked behind the table. "Back door!" Mercy yelled. Boyd turned in time to see a shadow trying the latch. He fired once, through the wood, and heard a man scream. The shadow dropped. Outside, the riders regrouped. Someone called out, "Throw out the woman, and we'll spare the ranch." Mercy stood, raised her voice without hesitation. "Come take me yourself, coward." Another round of gunfire followed. She dropped to the floor just before a bullet shattered the lantern. Smoke filled the room. Fire caught on the curtain. Boyd grabbed the fabric and ripped it down, stamping the flames underfoot. Then Mercy screamed. He turned and saw her bleeding from the shoulder, the journal slipping from her hand. "No," she cried, crawling toward it. A second bullet struck the floor beside her. Boyd dove, grabbed her with one arm, the journal with the other, and rolled them both behind the overturned table. "Stay down," he shouted. She pressed her palm to her wound, blood warm and fast. "Don't let it burn," she whispered. Boyd looked at the leather cover in his hand, now soaked with her blood. He knew what he had to do. He opened the trap door. Mercy shook her head. "No, they'll follow us." "Not us," he said. "Just me." He grabbed the satchel, shoved the journal inside, and pulled a wax-sealed envelope from the drawer by the stove. "What's that?" she asked. "Statement. Copy of the map. Names. I was going to use it if my brother ever came around." "You were going to blackmail him?" "I was going to make him choose." He stood tall. Mercy tried to rise. Failed. He knelt. "You're staying. I'll ride out the back. Draw them off." She gripped his arm, eyes wide. "Boyd, they'll kill you." He paused, then said, "Maybe. But they won't burn this truth." He pressed the journal into her arms, helped her to the cellar. Rufus whined, but followed her down. Boyd closed the trap door, covered it with flour sacks, then stepped out the back door into the fire-lit yard. 20 riders waited, and he rode straight at them. The old bay horse, half lame and ornery, snorted as Boyd mounted and kicked her into a gallop. He didn't wear his hat. He didn't wear a coat. The envelope was tucked into his shirt, the satchel with its duplicate journal across his chest. He rode fast and straight toward the lantern-lit line of riders at the edge of the ranch. The torches flared in the dark. 20 men on horseback shifting nervously as Boyd tore through the yard, the shadows of flame dancing across his face. He didn't fire. Not yet. But every man there knew he could. Marshal Harrow raised a hand, and the rifles lowered. Boyd reined in hard, the horse skidding sideways in the dirt, nostrils flaring. "I've got something for you," he said, loud and clear. Harrow's horse stepped forward. "You giving her up?" "No," Boyd said, pulling the satchel from his shoulder. "I'm giving you a choice." He tossed the bag to Harrow's feet. The marshal didn't move. Boyd added, "Inside is a copy of everything you came here to destroy. The real one's headed east. You burn me. The truth survives. You follow me. The truth disappears with us both. Either way, your secret's dead." One of the riders, younger, looked unsure now. He glanced at the man beside him, then at Harrow. The marshal dismounted slowly, picked up the bag, opened it. He flipped through the journal pages, saw the names, the map, the page with his own orders, his signature, dry but still legible. Then he laughed. "Hell of a play," he said. "But you think anyone out there cares about ink on paper?" "I think people care about the land they're about to lose," Boyd said, "and the blood spilled to take it. You think this makes you a hero?" "No," Boyd said, voice quiet now. "Just a man who let the wrong person sleep under his roof and paid for it with the rest of his life." Harrow stepped forward. His pistol gleamed. "Where's the woman?" "She's gone," Boyd said, "and if you have any brains left in your head, you'll let her stay that way." Harrow lifted the gun, and Boyd didn't flinch. Behind them, one of the riders shifted again. Then another. A voice called out from the dark, "He's right, Marshal. This ain't why I signed on." Another chimed in, "That woman's husband saved my cousin's land. Same year Jessup ordered half of Cimarron torched." Harrow hesitated. His grip faltered. Then coldly, "You're finished, Larkin." Boyd leaned forward in the saddle. Then finish it. A gun cocked, not Harrow's. It came from the flank. One of the riders, older, face half-shadowed, raised his rifle. Not at Boyd, at Harrow. "I didn't sign on to be your cover man," he said. "I rode with Jessup. I buried too many to bury more." Harrow turned, furious. "You lower that weapon." But he didn't get the chance. The rifle cracked. Harrow staggered. His gun dropped. He fell to his knees, staring at Boyd, then at the riders behind him. "They won't protect you," Boyd said. The marshal fell face first in the dirt. Dead. A long silence. Then Boyd turned to the other men. "Take him back. Say whatever you want, but leave my land. Leave her alone. You come back, and the whole world finds out what was done here." No one moved. Then the man with the rifle nodded. "I'll see to it." Boyd turned the horse, rode back toward the house at a trot. His arm burned. Blood trickled down his ribs. He didn't know when he'd been hit. Didn't matter. Back at the house, the yard was scorched in places. The front windows shattered. Smoke drifted from the porch. But it still stood. He dismounted, opened the trap door. Mercy blinked up at him, pale, blood-soaked, but alive. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "So are you." She climbed out slowly, journal in hand. Rufus followed. She looked out at the night. "Where's Harrow?" "Gone," Boyd said. She nodded once. Then she handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "A name," she said, "of the contact in Denver. He can get this to the press." Boyd took it. "You're not going?" She shook her head. "I've done what I came to do. They'll keep chasing me, but they won't know what I look like next time." He looked at her for a long time. "You'll disappear?" She smiled faintly. "Mercy isn't my real name." Didn't think it was. She reached out, pressed the journal into his hands again. "Make it count," she said. Then she kissed his cheek, quick and warm, and stepped off into the dark. Boyd watched her vanish into the night, her silhouette swallowed by the black. She didn't turn around, and she didn't have to. Boyd stood in the yard long after she was gone. The air had stilled, but the ground felt changed, like something sacred had passed through and left behind only the sound of the wind. He walked slowly back into the house, stepping over glass and splintered wood, the journal gripped in his left hand, blood leaking from a crease in his shirt. Inside, the fire had burned low. The smoke still clung to the walls. He tossed a few logs onto the embers and sat down with a grunt, rifle within reach. The journal laid carefully on the table. He didn't open it. Not yet. He needed to sit, to breathe. Rufus curled beside him, tail thumping once against the floorboards, then falling still. The house creaked as it cooled. Then the floor creaked again, not from the wind. Boyd was on his feet in a second, rifle up. But the voice came first. "I told them to wait till morning." He turned. A figure stepped through the broken front door, taller than Harrow, broad in the shoulders, uniform sharp as razors. Colonel Abram Jessup, alive. Real. And walking into Boyd's house like it was already his. Two men followed behind, clean-shaven, military eyes, holsters tight. Boyd didn't lower the rifle. Marshall's dead. "I know," Jessup said, calm as a priest at a hanging. He always did, lack vision. "What do you want?" Jessup looked around the house, noting the blood on the floor, the bullet holes in the doorframe, the shredded curtain. "Your ranch is condemned," he said, "by order of the Federal Expansion Board. effective at dawn. Boyd laughed, short and bitter. You think a piece of paper changes what just happened out there? Jessup's smile never broke. I think it's the only thing that matters in court. He took a step forward. Boyd kept the barrel level. You take one more step, you'll have to file a second condemnation on your own grave. Jessup stopped. I didn't come to kill you, Larkin, he said. I came to make an offer. Save your breath. Jessup nodded at the journal still on the table. I assume she gave you that. Boyd didn't answer. I know what's in it, Jessup said. Names, maps, maybe even the truth. But the truth doesn't build railroads, doesn't pay soldiers, doesn't win wars. You burned down towns, Boyd growled. I built futures, Boyd spat. For who? Jessup's face stayed still, but his eyes turned hard. I'm offering you a way out, he said. Keep your land. Keep your silence. Send the journal to me instead of Denver. I'll see to it that your name never appears on any list. And the woman? She'll vanish, same as she always planned. Boyd took a slow breath, then said, You still lie like you wear a Bible under your belt. Jessup tilted his head. This is the last kindness you'll be offered, Larkin. Refuse it, and you won't die in a blaze of glory. You'll die alone and forgotten. Boyd looked down at the rifle in his hands, then at the journal on the table. His fingers tightened. No, he said, I'll die honest, and that's worth more than what you're selling. Jessup didn't flinch. So be it. He turned. His men followed him out. Boyd watched them ride off. No shots fired. Not yet. But the message was clear. They'd be back. The next morning came quiet. Too quiet. Boyd packed the journal, the map, the envelope, sealed and addressed to the Tribune editor in Denver. He saddled the fastest horse he had left. By noon the sun was high and merciless, and then the smoke came. From the ridge. Black, thick, rising fast. He rode hard back to the house. Too late. Flames licked the rafters. The barn already collapsed. The porch engulfed. He dismounted as the fire cracked and roared. Jessup's signature, Boyd thought. Retaliation without a bullet. He didn't go inside, didn't try to save it. Instead, he walked to the well, drew a single bucket, and doused the last embers near the door, just enough to give himself space. He stood in the ashes, journal in his coat, wind in his face. Behind him, the fire swallowed the last of the roof. In front of him, the road stretched empty. But he wasn't alone. Rufus limped up beside him, head low, and down the trail, a lone rider approached. Not a soldier, not a threat, just a messenger boy, dusty, wide-eyed. You Boyd Larkin? The boy asked. Boyd nodded. The boy handed him a sealed note. Boyd opened it, a single sentence. The truth is yours to ride with. No name, no return address. But the handwriting was Mercy's. He folded the note, looked back once at the smoking ruin of the house, then mounted and rode, not toward revenge, but toward reckoning. The road to Denver was long, straight, and ruthless, the kind of ride that stripped a man down to sinew and breath. Boyd Larkin rode it alone. No letters to send, no ranch to protect, no past to cling to, just a journal in his coat and the weight of what it meant. He stayed off the main trail when he could, taking creek beds and dry gullies, avoiding outposts and mail stops. He knew there'd be eyes hunting him. Jessup wouldn't leave loose ends, and Boyd had become the loosest end of all. 2 days into the ride, a shot clipped his saddle horn. He didn't stop. On the third night, he found an old miner's camp buried in the hills, half collapsed, abandoned, but still dry. He lit no fire, ate jerky in the dark, slept with the journal under his chest and the rifle across his boots. He dreamed of fire, and of a woman with no name. By the 5th day, he reached the outskirts of Bent Fork Station, where the rail line to Denver began. The depot was swarming with uniformed men, traders, and 2 marshals sipping coffee from tin mugs. Boyd watched them from the tree line, then circled wide. There was another way to Denver, longer, harsher, but safer. He took it. Dajiddu. In Denver, Marshal Irwin leaned back in his office chair, chewing on a cigar that had long gone cold. He stared at the letter in his hands. The wax seal had been broken. The pages within smelled of smoke. The name at the bottom, Boyd Larkin, meant nothing to him until he read the second name, Colonel Abram Jessup. Irwin rose, crossed the room, opened a drawer marked Confidential, and dropped the letter inside. Then he poured 2 fingers of bourbon and waited. Boyd arrived in Denver 1 day later, thinner, blood-crusted from a shallow wound on his ribs, and half-starved. He handed the package to the clerk at the Tribune himself. "Get this to your editor," he said. "No one else touches it." The clerk stared. "What is it?" "Proof." "Of what?" Boyd looked out the window at the whitewashed Capitol rising above the city. "Everything." He didn't stay to explain. That night, in a cramped boarding house near the edge of the city, Boyd sat at a window, journal open, flipping through its pages again. He wasn't sure why. He already knew what it said. The dates, the land seizures, the falsified records, Jessup's own handwriting, authorizing emergency removals of civilian settlements, his brother's signature authorizing appropriations, and in the back, pressed between 2 final pages, a photo, black and white, faded, a woman with her hand on a man's shoulder, Mercy, and Thomas Renner. Boyd stared at it for a long time, then closed the journal. Outside, the city glowed with oil lamps and gaslight. Somewhere below, a printing press turned, ink staining truth into paper. The next morning, headlines screamed. Federal officers implicated in land grab scandal. Colonel Abram Jessup under investigation. Whistleblower's journal alleges murder, fraud, and railroad corruption. Boyd stood at the newsstand, hat pulled low. He didn't smile, but something in him loosened. He bought 2 copies, folded one, slipped it into his coat. The other he left tucked under a stone on the edge of town, next to a telegraph pole where the stage riders often stopped to rest. He pinned a note to it. For her, wherever she's gone. No name, but he knew she'd know it was from him. That evening, 3 federal men knocked on his boarding house door. One carried a telegram from the governor's office. One wore a badge from the U.S. Marshal Service. The third held out a folded envelope. Inside, an offer. Protection, relocation, a new name if he wanted it. Boyd didn't read past the first paragraph. He looked up. "I'm not hiding." "You'll be hunted," the marshal warned. "I already was. You're not a soldier anymore." "No," Boyd said. "I'm worse. I'm honest." The marshal gave him a look, but they left him be, and he stayed right where he was. That night, he didn't sleep. He just sat by the window again, watching the street, waiting to see what kind of world would wake up now that the truth was out. 3 days later, Boyd Larkin walked into the Capitol building. He didn't carry a rifle, didn't wear a hat, just the same torn coat, boots dusted from the trail, and the weariness of a man who had nothing left to burn. Inside the chamber, voices echoed like distant thunder. News of the scandal had moved faster than any bullet. The papers had printed the names, the photographs, the ledger pages, even the final signature that tied Colonel Jessup and Edwin Larkin to the string-pulled scheme. It had rattled the city, but not everyone had fallen. Boyd stood at the back as his brother took the podium, shoulders stiff beneath a navy blue coat. Senator Edwin Larkin began his defense. This is a witch hunt, a fabrication, a ploy to undermine the expansion effort that will bring prosperity to this territory. My signature, yes, appears in those documents, but only in a supporting role, never as an architect. Boyd stepped forward, not toward the podium, but toward the aisle. Someone noticed him. A murmur started. Edwin saw him. For a brief second, something faltered in the senator's voice. He cleared his throat, then continued, louder now. The journal in question has not been verified by federal authorities. The woman behind these allegations remains unidentified and unaccountable. Boyd kept walking, closer, until he stood beneath the podium, eyes locked with his brother's. He said nothing, but held up a single piece of paper, the photograph, Mercy and Thomas Renner. Edwin's voice caught again. "You have no place here, Boyd," he said quietly, through the mic. Boyd stared. "Neither do you." Edwin straightened. "You're throwing away blood for politics. That woman used you." "No," Boyd said. "She trusted me, which is more than anyone's ever done for you." A security guard stepped forward, but Boyd raised a hand. "I'm leaving," he said, "but you'll be next." He turned, walked out under the marble arch, boots echoing over polished tile, and the chamber fell into stunned silence. 2 weeks passed. Boyd didn't return to the city. He traveled west, then south, staying in ghost towns and way stations, never long enough to root. The name Larkin began to disappear from headlines, replaced by newer flames, arrests, testimonies, resignations. Colonel Jessup was court-martialed, stripped of rank. Senator Larkin denied all wrongdoing, but stepped down. Boyd didn't celebrate. He just kept riding. One dusk, outside a mining town where the hills ran dry and red, he found a letter waiting at the postmaster's bench. No return address, just the name, Mr. B. Larkin. He opened it. Inside, a single note. "The fire you lit reached farther than I ever could. I'm alive. I'm free. That's because of you." No signature, but she'd pressed a sprig of dry sage between the pages. He held it in his palm for a long time, then tucked it into his vest. The next day, he came across a child near a half-built barn, trying to lift a hammer too big for his hands. The boy dropped it in the dust, frustrated. Boyd knelt, picked it up. "Try holding it lower," he said. "Balance is in the wrist." The boy looked up. "You a builder?" "No," Boyd said, "but I've rebuilt." He helped him drive the first nail straight. The boy grinned, and for the first time in a long time, Boyd smiled back. He stayed in that town for a week, Then another. Someone offered him a place to sleep. Someone else offered to trade work for eggs. The name Larkin was just another syllable here, and that suited him fine. One morning he saddled up, tied his pack tight, and stared at the open road. He wasn't going anywhere in particular, but he wasn't running either. He rode off slowly, as the sun caught the edge of the hills like gold on fire. Not toward vengeance, not toward redemption, just forward, carrying nothing but silence, memory, and a single word burned into his heart. Mercy. Justice rides fast, but sometimes mercy rides faster. Boyd Larkin didn't seek to be a martyr or a hero, only a man willing to answer when truth knocked at his door in the form of a woman soaked by rain. In choosing to protect her, he lost his land, his peace, even the name he once stood for, but in return, he reclaimed something deeper, a sense of justice that wasn't inked on paper or carved in courtrooms, but earned through grit, sacrifice, and quiet resolve. He reminded the world, and himself, that sometimes the strongest stand a man can take is beside someone others have tried to erase. And in that choice, he found something rare on the frontier, not just justice, but peace.